Now, and I'm expanding at that. Pose this question with name, image, and likeness for these kids. Could one of these kids become so industrious enough they can create an image and likeness, and that's nobody else can utilize it, and if they utilize it, they have to start paying them? Have you starting to see this on the horizon? Is this about to just bust wide open now with NIL coming at the forefront now?
Absolutely. And so that's a good transition because, especially with AI, and I don't know, this generation, these children are smart. They know how to set up websites, they know how to create podcasts and stores and things. And so, what can happen, AD, is remember, name, image, and likeness is just that you can get paid for an endorsement deal for your name, for them to use your picture, for them to use your likeness. But here's the thing, if you are providing products and services or intending to provide products and services using your trademark, which could be a word, a symbol like a silhouette, like you said, a color, a sound, when you have your own trademark, those companies have to respect it. So now you go to them and they say, hey, I see you posting on social media, and every time you post, you have your silhouette on all your graphics. Well, if you have the trademark for it now, going back to Justin's questions, they have to pay you for it. You can license it, you can assign it. And I believe Michael Jordan was one of the first athletes that actually owned his brand, when he went to the NBA. So if you know that your children have potential, and I am working with, a lot of children of all ages whose parents are saying, hey, my child is number one in the country in track, we better get this. But I will say it's not just protecting the name, is protecting the name used as a source identifier so people perceive it as a brand, and then it has to be intended to be used for products or services or used for products and services. So again, I trademark Andrea for clothes, and then you say, okay, well, I'm going to be Andrea for a podcast. I technically can't stop you because that's not related. But if I'm Andrea for shoes and you say I'm going to be Andrea for socks, okay, now I can enforce my trademark as well. So it's something to me that goes hand in hand. Some people believe that once you're making money, okay, now I'm going to get the federal trademark. See, I don't subscribe to that. I believe that I want to be ready. If Oprah calls me and says, oh, you're the best, I already have all my ducks in a row. Because also remember, this is not something that happens overnight. So this is a federal government process. So once you file, it can take 10 to 12 months before they even assign it to that trademark attorney to examine it. So what we do at my firm is once you come to me and say, hey, I'm going to be AD Moore, I'm going to use it for shirts, I'm going to have a podcast, I'm going to do this, then we need to do some research. Because to me, it makes more sense to change the name now, not just wait on them to tell you that you can't use it, because we're talking about a year from now. So most people want to file and get started and start selling. So I want to make sure you do your due diligence. So before you even go to an attorney, start researching the name, seeing how other people are using it, and then be honest with yourself. Step back and say, yeah, I would have a problem if somebody was Andrea for a law firm and somebody was Andrea for paralegal services. But you see Andrea for candy, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't have any problems with that. And then also, just think about it. It could be something negative affiliated with it. So if I'm Andrea the law firm, and then there's Andrea for, some kind of scandalous types of services, even though it's not going to confuse people, I may not want people searching for my name and having that pop up. So it's so much to think about in a name, in your brand. And we see that every day because brands are valuable. So when I say to you today, you all want my Andrea purse or you want the Louis Vuitton purse, you're going to probably say you want the Louis Vuitton purse, and they can look just alike. It's because that brand is perceived to be extremely valuable. So you think about yourself as a brand and start protecting it.
Could I let me? I'm sorry. I'm sort of. I'm
Laquita,
like
hold up, Eddie.
Laquita.
Laquita, you got a question?
Hold
Hold up.
on, hold on, hold on.
Go ahead.
So, in your opinion, when student athletes are getting ready to transition to college, especially the top 1%, what should be the first things that they do, especially if they have a nice following on social media, they're coming in at the top 1%, they're well known, and they haven't done anything, and they have a big NIL opportunity on the table. what would be some of the first things they need to do, as far as trademarking anything that they have, their nickname, their slogan, or whatever? What would be the first thing they need to do first?
Well, I want you to start thinking about the name, and then once you're, kind of you've solidified that name, make a list of all the products and services. And remember, you have to intend to do this and ultimately do it. But one thing I want you all to think about is endorsement services are services that you provide to others, influencer services. So you can actually set up a site, Andrea Evans, and then advertise your services. And now you're using Andrea Evans as a brand. So it's kind of hard for people to distinguish, but your name will always be Laquita. You get on the show, and Chris is going to say Laquita is here on the show. But then when it's Laquita Presents How to Survive College, now that becomes a brand that people perceive as a brand. So your name can also function as a trademark. And honestly, most of our favorite brands that we see are individuals. So I think when people start thinking about it that way, Ralph Lauren, most of the perfume, those are all people. So that's their names. But now once they slap it on a product, it becomes qualifiable to be a trademark. So that's what I want you to think about. So what they need to do is, this is separate from trademarks, is lock in your social media, lock in domain names, spell correctly and misspelled. Because if I'm looking for Chris, I may not know to look for it with the K, so I need to put in Chris with the CH2, and I buy as many as I can because that's inexpensive and most of the social media handles are free. And then that way, whatever site that you plan to use that's spelled correctly, you can have all the misspelled ones go to that correct spelling. And then once you do that, you need to contact myself or another IP attorney to do some research. And, at that time, that's more of a strategy as well, because that's going to tell you, well, somebody already has Andrea for clothing, but you can get it for the podcast. And then they may say no, because you can have multiple trademarks. So your clothing line can be Andrea, but your podcast can be Abracadabra, and your shoes can be. So you have to kind of think about what you want to do. And some clients will say, no, I want everything to match, so I'm going to change it. Or I thought I was going to be Andrea, but it's already 50 different Andreas, so I'm going to add a word to it. And then we look and see if it's going to be a strong word. So you need, and the name is important, right? So you want it to have that research done. And we do two types of searches. We do one that's just US. So the USPTO is the one where we search the USPTO database and look to see if there's a likelihood of confusion. The second one that we do is all the common law. So we're looking at social media, domain names, how people use that word, and then we have come to the conclusion of yes, there's no risk, little risk, or high risk, and then you can make a more informed decision. So searching is going to be critical, Laquita. That's what I recommend first. But you want to make sure you're clear before you pay to have a consultation and pay to get that search done. Having an interview like this should bring awareness to people to say, well, I did see another Chris with the K already for clothing. So you probably have to change the name or do something to make it more distinguishable.
AD, go ahead.
My brain just started racing right now. I wanna just follow up with that particular question, what you were talking about, Laquita. When you start searching, how do you take in the effect of the algorithms that these sites might use in order to get, because that's one of the primary things to get your name probably to the top. Is that part of the function that you utilize with your clientele, or is that just something that you have to bring in order to do the manipulation on the algorithms just to get your name? Because now when you start searching, you want to probably be some of the, because how we as a person, now that we search, we see the top 1 through 5 or whatever the case. So I'm just sort of wondering, does that sort of work in your purview of what you provide as a client to your clients?
Well, not you're talking about two different things. So one thing is when I search, I want to be at the top for marketing. But what we're doing is we have proprietary software that we're using that's similar to what the government used. And then because I worked as a trademark attorney at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office giving out trademarks, I feel like I can foresee things that someone without my skill set would overlook. So I'm able to
Okay.
spotlight things and say, okay, this is going to be a problem. And then the other thing is, I think the biggest misconception and thing that people don't know is kind of what we started talking about in the beginning, is that it's not the first to file, it's the first to use. Because I have people coming to me all the time saying, yeah, I saw that somebody was selling abracadabra, but he's just selling out of the trunk of his car, and I'm going to sell in Macy's. So he's not going to be smart enough to get the trademark. It doesn't matter, because if they miss that period of publication where they don't know to challenge you, once you get the trademark, the first 5 years of having it, it can still be challenged. So you're not out of the clear, because remember, it's who used it first. So even if Bob is selling out of his trunk, if he used it first, he can challenge you for it. So I say, it's an investment, and there are a lot of kids with the same names and a lot of common first names and nicknames. So you want to ensure that you're filing and getting the trademark and then policing it. Because then if you get AD Moore, and then I want to be AD Moore abracadabra, and then a laundry list of people start following behind with all these words, then it makes your trademark weak. So it's harder for you to enforce, and that should make sense. When it's time to sell it, somebody's going to say, well, shoot, there are 100 of these, so your trademark's not worth a lot.
Andrea, how did you get involved in this? What inspired you to start this?
Well, I actually have a math and civil engineering degree from Spelman and Georgia Tech. And when I was in Atlanta, I thought that I would come to DC and focus on environmental law. And I ended up graduating from George Washington Law School, which is the #1 law school for intellectual property law. And so, as fate would have it, my professors found out I had the STEM background, which is required to be a patent attorney. And so they said, hey, you should try this out. I was talking to some of my other colleagues and interned at different law firms, and I fell in love with intellectual property. And when I worked at the patent office, I started as a patent examiner, even though I had passed the patent bar and the Texas bar, and I wanted to be an attorney. And so I applied and got the job as a trademark examining attorney, started doing that and fell in love with that. But I had a mentor. And because I worked in the government, as people would call my firm, I would refer them to him. And he said, hey, I think you're getting a little comfortable. While I appreciate you referring all this business to me, I think that you could be making a larger and greater impact. And so I said, okay, well, let me come work at your firm. And his firm was maybe an hour and a half, commute and stuff. And he basically said, okay, well, you can come work at the office and use our office, and whatever money you make, you can keep. And I said, well, shoot, if I'm going to do that, I might as well have my own law firm. And the rest is history. I just stepped out on faith. And what I found, Chris, is I just started telling people what I was doing. And all of my colleagues thought I was crazy, because most people with my experience don't want to represent individuals and entrepreneurs. They just want to represent the large companies. So I'm very thankful to have represented everybody, down to somebody tinkering in their garage to, probably your favorite company. So I'm very fortunate to have done that. And I love what I do, because as you can see, every day is something exciting. And so that raises a good point, because if there are any inventors on here, they're going to want to patent their inventions. The trademark is going to be for you to protect the name of that invention, or these brands that we're talking about today. And then the copyright's going to protect your written work. So all your scripts, the video recordings of the podcast, the artwork. And so everybody has some type of intellectual property. And it's unfortunate, because minorities and women are least likely to protect their intellectual property. So whenever there's an opportunity, I'm excited to talk about it, because I feel like everybody always learns something, and they have that kind of light bulb moment where they start taking it serious. And I think when you think about your legacy, and long when you're gone, that these trademarks can still be around and bringing value to your family, and that you have the opportunity to license it and will it and sell it. It's just something everybody should consider, just like you consider when you buy your house.